And then let's do screen sharing. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody. So we are going to be exploring Pathwork Guide Lecture number 190. It was delivered, according to this, March 26, 1971. And it's titled The Importance of Experiencing All Feelings, including fear, and then hyphen the dynamic state of laziness. So I'm going to skip, he has a little, sort of digression in the beginning here, and then he begins on this topic down a paragraph or so. He says, "We all know, my friends, how important and essential it is to face and accept those aspects, feelings, convictions, and attitudes in you, which are either not at all conscious or not sufficiently so. Unless this awareness is cultivated, it is impossible to free the innermost center of your being, the nucleus from which all life springs." So, back to sort of our earlier discussion, this is, I think a part of where kind of core energetics historically came in, because when I think about it, right, the parts that are sort of unconscious are really, what's in the body or below our story level, right? And oftentimes when people come, they begin talking from the story, but it's like stuff they already know, and it doesn't really go very deep into the feelings anyway. There's, some kind of feeling aspect. So I think in the beginning, especially, like just to help people realize that there was more inside of them than they knew about, right? That these strong, provocations or energetic charging and, discharging of emotional, through the body, right? It was kind of, I think, John P's offering here. And it helped. I mean, I knew for myself, like I was touching into deeper layers than I had touched into before. And, it's like a lot of times, even in those, drama scenes, right? If I could get out of sort of like fully into the feeling, I'm just hitting on the tennis racket and things are coming out of me. And I would realize, oh, new things would come. I would say things in the heat of the feelings, in the movement that I didn't know was inside of me. So I always, did support, this basic understanding and how important. And sometimes I think it is that we need to, activate it, through the body and in the body. And a lot of times back in those days, core energetics was done really more with a direct, oftentimes you didn't really know what the story was, because somebody would press on some body part and all of a sudden, like, squeeze your jaws or something, and all of a sudden you would feel your anger and resistance coming up, or, you would drop into some pain or something like that, that would be directly from some physical manipulation. And so, there's a lot of different understandings of this, and ways that we do need to just explore and become more conscious of so much more that's inside of us. And I think it's like it's through the body that we, our mind has a story going on and knows what it knows. And then if you can drop out of the story and notice even, what that story brings up in the body, then you're in new territory and you can learn something new. So he continues, "As far as it is possible to generalize, I can say that by now many of you are in a position to acknowledge your destructive, negative, cruel, hostile, and selfish feelings and attitudes. You are able to see the mechanisms of your defenses to some extent. But even this partial awareness makes so much difference. It shifts your entire position towards yourself. You no longer require yourself to defend your defenses or to pretend to be so perfect that everything in you ought to be right. The capacity to own up to being fallible, human, vulnerable, irrational, wrong, needy, defenseless, weak, and unhappy must by necessity increase your capacity to be strong, truly right and not self-righteous, truly independent and fulfilled. So let's pause here. Like, I mean, I think that that's a beautiful, rendering of, sort of this humble human place, like when we can let go of this need to defend our defenses and to be right, and just own up to our real self, being fallible human, vulnerable, irrational, wrong, needy. I had an example, like we found out just a little bit ago that the plans for the date of the closing for this property, that's like a big deal and is taking a lot, like the bank screwed up. And so now it's like moved forward to the 22nd. And, that kind of upended like everything. And also my, like we've got the community weekend coming up and other things that I had planned, up until there. So my first reaction was, to feel, unjustly, put out and, unhappy and, mad and, it was very beautiful because in this community that's forming, like I was able to kind of initially just express that, right? But by the time I had spoken my feelings, and real kind of got to the truth of the uh, if it really needs to be, and that kind of thing there. And later, it was very clear to me, okay, so that reaction was from, the place of lack of faith, that maybe this could be a better situation than what I thought, and the guide is always saying, we don't see the bigger picture, right? And I started looking at the situation more clearly and I saw, yeah, okay, I can work around it. It's not ideal, but who knows. So like allowing the not knowing and allowing a kind of trust in the universe, and that also trust in just it is what it is, right? So like being unhappy about it doesn't serve anything, right? And so there's this place though that we can move through those feelings, right? And ideally to me that is a what we want to do is move it out, and then we can get to the next level and then the next level of truth. So the admission of heretofore apparently inadmissible feelings is the bridge to inner unity and fulfilling self-expression of life. The acceptance of your hate will make you more loving. The acceptance of your weakness will make you stronger. The acceptance of your pain will allow you to become more blissful. I have pointed out these apparent paradoxes often, and I believe that many of you have actually begun to experience their truth. To remove self-illusions seems at first insurmountably difficult, since all human beings vaguely believe that the underlying truth is unacceptable, and therefore they themselves are unacceptable. So a double illusion must be removed. First, the underlying belief in question, as well as the cover you put over it. And this is always the most arduous part of the path work. I'm going to go back up and see if that sentence makes a little more sense. Did I miss something? To whatever degree you have accomplished the shedding of defenses and have thus become that much more real, you have gained significant ground. And this will make the further steps in that direction easier. For the beginning of any given phase is always the most difficult. So yeah, and then to remove the self-illusions is our, sometimes, it's like because we're afraid of, what we find, or we don't accept ourselves and we don't accept everything in us, right? So in some ways there's a part of us that is resisting self-facing because we do our own self-judgment of what we find there.
Darling, can I comment on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just thinking with your example, that feeling the feelings might be just like without judgment, meaning that it's not that when you got hopeful, it's better than when you were desperate, or like, you know what I mean? It's like where now I am feeling like that this is unfair. Now I'm feeling hopeful, then it might be feeling again like it's not gonna happen. Like, but not like necessarily like in a hierarchy of feelings where hope is better than despair. Or do you think there is sort of like a better way of feeling than other?
I mean, it's interesting, good question, because I know in most Buddhist thought, right, that's a part of the practice, right, is to see that one is not better than the other. And I think that there is a spiritual truth in that. And yet, like for me, I always come to a place of peace when I feel like I've resolved the underlying duality and conflict inside of myself, right, based on truth in some way, right? So like to remember, to recall to mind, in my experience, many times I've, gone into, oh, this is terrible. The world is coming apart, and then lo and behold, like the world continues and I'm okay. And it's not as bad as I thought it would be, or somehow I make it through, so like the big trauma stuff, like, that we go into, it feels like, you get to a place where, again, maybe the initial expression of it comes through just to clear the charge that might be there, but then you remember more quickly, oh yeah, I know this place, and I don't really know what's next, or if this is as bad as I think it is, or, and the truth is, in my experience, the guide has said, well, trust that the universe is basically benign. And that's been my experience. It's like I've been amazingly blessed and graced in spite of some difficult things, right? So to give my trust in that, and align myself in that way and find peace in this sort of leaning back into and sort of the other side of it is, and whatever it is, we'll work it out, we'll handle it, right? It's like, so then it feels like that's a better thing for me, and a process that is a little different than just allowing it to be as it is and recognizing that it's all, acceptable, right? Or it's all embraceable. I think there's a place where we want to embrace. I think we can't even do this other part of the work unless we are, like fully accepting and embracing what is there as it is.
Mm.
But then it
Yeah.
often feels like it wants to move into some higher state from there. Right.
Mm. Yeah, I guess what you're allowing me to know to get at is like, um what is the truth in here, right? So when you're desperate, it is true that people are disappointing and systems are disappointing. That doesn't mean everything is bad. And when you're hopeful, that doesn't mean you're not going to have any hiccup again or anything. Like, it's just like finding the truth in every aspect of it, I guess.
Yeah,
Integrate both. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. So yeah, and it's interesting to look at the different ways that these systems are taught and work slightly differently, but I think in the long run they are kind of going ultimately to the same understanding. So he says it's necessary for us to comprehend on a deeper level where the negative attitudes and destructiveness come from. And then he asks, what is the real origin of evil? You know, and have often heard me say that the denial of your vulnerabilities, your shame of feeling helpless, your feeling of being unlovable, create evil and destructive attitudes and feelings. In other words, evil is a defense against suffering. All defenses create more suffering, as well as confusion, since you can no longer be connected with the real feelings in the self. It is therefore obvious that your further direction on the path can now be more directly concerned with the hurts and sufferings you have endured in your early life and have defended against so far. The denial of the original experience compels you to re-experience it over and over again. You recreate the denied experience and thus increase the accumulated pain and hurt. More of this re-experiencing must still be done, and now it can be done safely. So I think this here also kind of describes some of the earlier, sort of recycling of the pain body state in some way, because there's a way that even though we're feeling the feelings, we're still denying them, right? At some level, we're still judging, thinking we're hopeless, thinking, we're bad or they're bad or something's wrong, or, and so there's this kind of, and then there's this defense, that, so that we can, for me, whenever I go into like, well, what is this bottom line thing that I'm defending against? So many times it's just the simple grief of the child having not been met somehow. And like so many of us, I mean, it's really tragic, that we brought this beautiful loving spirit that just wanted to be connected to the people around it, and there was this tragedy of kind of immense proportions in a way that I don't think we fully realized, and we couldn't grieve it then, right? It wasn't possible to grieve it then. We had to survive, if we and there was nobody. Grief kind of requires a container for that grief, either a ritual, held in community, or, like somebody holding the pain, right? Holding the sadness. And so the child couldn't possibly, hold its own, like somebody saying it's going to be okay in the long run, or it's like just holding you while you cry or something like that. So when that wasn't there, what we had to do is like freeze and push that down and deny that. And so we often think, oh, to feel my real feelings, it's all this drama and trauma and angst and craziness, and it's really not. It's really just to drop into the simple grief of the original loss that was there, and support the inner child to feel like yeah, that was real, and it hurt, and it's okay. And so I think when we can do that, then there is a way that we can do this re-experiencing safely, as you say. So he says, when the defenses are still strong, they block the path to the emotional experience, so that the attempt to get to the feelings is choked off, or the sudden crashing through the defenses causes injury to the psyche, which can and should be avoided. And so here I think he's sort of referring to some of the practices that we were doing, right? But it's like, there did feel like in some ways, a cathartic effect to that, right? And so like also people felt, like, and that's where like friends say, people wanted that, right? So and then the other thing is oftentimes, it was like it took that kind of, took all of that group energy, all of that, kind of dynamism to break through the resistances, to going into deep regressions, to going into, the deeper realms of our feelings. So
there were some tricks along the way, though. Like role playing, it was like, I think that was a big part of the method. I know that happened very quickly on in class. When something was up, the teachers would step in and set up a role playing sort of situation that would sort of loosen loosen it up, so to speak, in a way, and get it out.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like it needs to be, exposed. It needs to come out of the unconscious in more spontaneous ways, and we're really good at hiding ourselves, and that kind of stuff. So, these tricks, like you said, it's like often had some value, but I think there is a way that, I feel like I'm learning at least maybe how you can support people to also, have a better foundation.
I'm also wondering when he mentions dissolving the double illusion, if he's not talking about the images and the idealized self-image that we develop to cover up the false images that we have of ourselves.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember. He sort of defined it up there. I can't remember.
Well, he just mentioned a double illusion.
Yeah.
It just rung true in my, when I heard it, it's like, oh, well, first I need to dissolve a false image that I have about myself. And then I need to dissolve the idealized self-image that I've been portraying to the world to cover up this false image that I have of myself
Right.
for so long.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, I think that's basically, exactly it. And so, like we choke off our feelings. When the defenses are strong, they block the path to the emotional experience. And so that the attempt to get to the feeling is choked off, or then, there's a sudden breakthrough of the defenses, and, a lot of the, pain comes out, but it can be sometimes like again, if you don't have the proper support, and there is a kind of re-traumatizing. So you're now truly ready, my friends, to venture into the depths of your being. There you can let go and give yourself freely to all the accumulated feelings which up to now could never leave your system. They could not be transformed before now into their natural energy stream, precisely because you had locked the gates against feeling your feelings. So this is important to me, like he says it, because this is where it's like it takes me right to, he's talking here not about sort of feeling the emotional aspect, which is the story plus feeling, but he's talking about the energy current. He's talking about, our energy bodies, right? And when we can venture into the depths of our being and like it's sort of like feel like, okay, so where am I holding on to this, where's there tension in my body, pressure, that's kind of like a block to a natural energy stream, and where I can go in and find, some pain state, either even physical, but also, like heaviness or, some, anger or fear or whatever, that it's in the body, and you can go and you can just be present to the like the place it is in the body. And again, with our presence, right, that's our awareness, that's like our higher self present to whatever's there. It's like a containment that then allows and welcomes, expansion, movement, because it's a contracted state, right, of energy. So the guide has a lot of other lectures on, the expansion and contracting forces, and, the defense and all of these things. So free flowing is, kind of what can heal and what can cleanse and what can set free. And, defended, contracted, held, is what we're trying to release. And, we can kind of blast through those blocks when we activate it with drama, but we can also sit inside ourselves, noticing the holding that we're doing unconsciously, right? And maybe explore it, like, well, let's see if we can make it a little more conscious and hold a little tighter. What am I doing? How am I doing it? What is it saying? What is the holding afraid of, right? There's lots of ways that we can kind of penetrate and explore. And then also just when we can recognize and be grounded in the fact that we really are safe to experience whatever, is there. we can command that block in a way to release, to let go. And we have to be willing then to feel what's there, right? And so first is maybe the fear, because that was the, like we experienced something and it was not good, and so we tried to defend against it. We locked it into a closet, and said don't ever go there. And so it's got like this skull and crossbones on the closet, right? And so every time we get close to the closet, we don't even know what's inside. We're automatically in fear because we see the skull and crossbones, right? Danger, danger, this is not a place to be, and so we go into a fear reaction. And so that's also where we have to, like be with and know the fear is, unless there's a tiger on our tail, probably not real here, and it's just a feeling, and we can open and feel what fear feels like. I think that was in one of the dramas of stories of Christ. I can't remember which one, but when Judas kisses Jesus, Jesus says, and so now I know what it what falseness feels like, right? So there's this kind of way that we just need to feel what's true, what's there, what it is. And let's see, where did I lose my place? So let yourself go and give yourself freely to all the accumulated feelings, which up to now could never leave your system. And when I feel this, a lot of times it's just purely energy moving up like through a chimney and releasing out the top. Sometimes it's like I feel a space and I'm following it, and it takes me very deep inside, and then I might hit some location where I burst into sobs and tears, and I don't even know initially what I'm crying about, but as I'm releasing the awareness of, that what I'm feeling, gets clear, and maybe an experience of that, but for sure what I'm feeling, right? And then I can, like hold that space and compassion, and the feeling can be felt and released rather than, felt and, like recycled into the hard pain. So now he kind of switches into laziness. He says, some time ago, I was asked to discuss the problem of laziness. And there is an intimate connection between the problem of laziness and feelings that have not been fully experienced. So, where we're blocking the energy flow around all of these feelings, then we might begin to feel lethargic in some way, right? So he says, do not look at laziness as an attitude to be given up at will. It's not something that's bad that you should just make yourself stop doing. If only the person could finally come around to being reasonable and constructive, right? This is not a moralistic issue at all. Laziness is a manifestation of apathy, stagnation, and paralysis, a result of stagnant energy in the soul substance. Stagnant soul substance is the result of feelings that have not been fully experienced or expressed, and therefore their significance and true origin have not been totally understood. When feelings are not thus experienced, understood, and expressed, they accumulate and stop the flow of the life force.
That is huge right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, people just so summarily say, well, I'm lazy. I don't want to do that because I'm lazy. Or they look at kids who seem to be totally stuck and are acting with a lot of laziness. And it's like no one has ever have I ever heard anybody say, well, the reason you're so lazy is because you have some stagnated emotional energy that you need to get into and release.
Yeah.
No one has ever said that.
Yeah, I know. It's, again, and it's so true. I mean, I can testify to it. It's like the minute that I do not feel like my energy is present, my life force is present, I go inside and see what needs to be cleared. I mean, I can try to do my life, sort of with my will, forcing myself to function, still all blocked up, but it's misery and I'm not very good at that. And so, I usually succumb to laziness, or I, realize, oh, I need to go feel something here. And
Yeah, I see it with depression in my case. Like I would, like a lot of people would see me as lazy because I was depressed, but I would never. Like I wish someone would have told me that it was because I wasn't feeling feelings. Because you think depression is just being sad, but it ain't. It's not. It's just yeah. So I feel like yeah, this is huge.
yeah, yeah. I think it's like a kind of a numbness, and you can feel in the state of depression how, how that kind of sense of, you know, the energy of depression is sort of distinct from sadness or grief in a way. So he says, there still exists many defenses against the full experience of accumulated feelings in you. Keeping this in mind will help you to focus your attention and awareness upon these defenses to overcome them more and more. And again, I think it's so great just to go in your daily meditation, to scan your body and just notice, where is my body tight? Where am I, unconsciously holding, uh, and, play with your breath, open to getting some more charge and life force in you, and feel, where even in, the breathing, to increase the breathing, there's resistance or holding or, all of this just, and it's again, not to judge it, but just to notice. And as you're presencing it, and aware of it, oftentimes that's all it takes and it begins to change. And if it doesn't, don't judge yourself or get frustrated and try to use your outer will. You can, like be more conscious and explore. Maybe you can like learn something about how to set it free, or what it needs or what it's speaking again, and do this kind of inner process. But just to be there present, and even if you don't open everything, you'll clear some of it, and that will make you lighter and give you more life force to do your day. So So keeping this in mind will help you to focus your attention and awareness upon the defenses. You can systematically lower the threshold of defending against your deep accumulated experiences, which have become poisonous from not being released. These painful experiences cannot be released if they are not felt, known, expressed, and lived through as fully as possible. To recapitulate, all that is evil, destructive, and negative in human nature is a result of defending against experiencing painful, undesirable feelings. This denial stagnates energy. When feelings stagnate, energy stagnates. And if energy stagnates, you cannot move. As you know, feelings are moving energy currents. They transform constantly from one set or type of feeling into another, as long as energy flows freely. Not experiencing feeling stops the movement of those currents and therefore stops the living energy. When the natural energy flow is halted within your soul substance, you find yourself in the position of feeling laziness, that state where movement is possible only when it is forced painfully by the outer will. This explains the hankering that exists in so many people for a seemingly desirable inactive life. It is not enough to say that these people find the difficulties of life too much for them because they are immature. This is merely a label or an explanation of an affect. Natural movement is a spontaneous expression of the inner energy flow that is never experienced as arduous or painful, nor as tiring or undesirable in any way. So, my friends, when you find yourself stagnating, lazy, passive, or inert, and when you desire to do nothing, which is often confused with the spiritual state of just being, you have a good gauge that there are feelings in you which have created psychic toxicity because you were loath to experience and acknowledge them. Let me pause there a little bit. So it's like, you know, again, just recapitulating, I think, in a really good way, you know, like that we just need to be with our feelings and really allow them to move in us and release. And again, I think, you know, if we think of our feelings as our emotions, you know, and so we're, oh, that means I have to go back in and, you know, relive my betrayal by my, you know, father or my mother or whoever, you know, or the torment that I experience, you know, then of course we don't want to do that, right? But if you recognize that all of those unexperienced feelings from back then are still in your body, and probably where your body is in, you know, some kind of uncomfortable state, contracted state, you know, even, you know, maybe some, as you get older, I think it, you know, that's where your physical difficulties start manifesting as well. And so, you know, we can begin to just welcome the movement wherever there is. I do a lot of body work, and that helps too, I think, you know, just to feel what's stuck in you.
You know, I had a little bit of a revelation the other day concerning my mother, because I think that her attitude towards me my entire life was like something that really kind of like kept me in a sort of a suppressed state, so to speak. It affected me emotionally forever, you know? And I just had this realization the other day that it wasn't personal. It was a character flaw, you know? It was her character flaw that made me feel the way I felt. Right. She did it to everybody, really.
Exactly. And it's like, that's like waking up in a way, right? You know, it's like, you know, and recognizing, you know, like how, you know, the child consciousness does perceive everything through its own lens, right? And it's all about, you know, itself, and it gets lost in this story about itself, and probably none of it is true. You know, it's like so, and that's what we're waking up out of, and then, you know, we can help heal it, right? Then we can catch it, and then we can rewrite over it, you know, and find the truth. So he says, the stagnation of energy currents traps not only feelings, but concepts as well. We generalize from single occurrences and hold on to the resulting false beliefs. It is rare that stagnant feelings do not also include stagnant conceptualizations of life. And so a lot of times when I'm into, you know, feeling in my body, you know, like the block, right, I'm also trying to listen to, like, what does this believe, right? Is there, you know, like an image here, you know, behind this no, right? Because usually what I'm feeling is the resistance to the no, right? You know, yes is expansion and let go. No is contraction and resistance. And so, you know, the no is based on some concept that's probably not true. And so if I can, you know, explore, like, okay, what am I saying no to with this, you know, energy stuck in me, or this, you know, tension in my body that won't let go. And then oftentimes I can translate, you know, that into, you know, what the belief is and what the image is, and then again re-educate the child, right? So he says, it's rare that stagnant feelings do not also include stagnant conceptualizations of life. These may exist in the deepest recesses of the soul, totally hidden from consciousness. This is what I called years ago the images that are held within the psyche. You talked about too, like, you know, these spheres of consciousness, and I often feel like that too, that they're like states of consciousness that have their own story and their own kind of wholeness, right? And it's like they sort of possess us, right? Or we enter different spheres of consciousness in different times, that he says over and over again, we are entrapped in the cycle of reproducing the past in one way or another until we can summon the courage to choose to live through now what was not lived through before because of your defenses. So this is also a beautiful thing because, really life just kind of keeps forcing us to be triggered, and we get all frustrated with ourselves because we think, oh, now I'm doing it again. But in a sense, we have to wake up. It's not about doing it again. It's about, recognizing that we're still trying to, live through the past, and we have to realize and choose something else. We have to recognize what we're doing and choose not to do that anymore.
I think it's also important the way the guide folded the images into this, and my personal experience, it's like, okay, so I just talked about how my mother's attitude towards me affected me. Well, the image that I developed from that was I am not enough. I can't please my mother, therefore I must not be enough. If I can't please my mother, how can I please anybody? And that was an image that I carried my entire life. I'm not enough.
Right. Exactly. And I think, the guide is even saying, so, like this is part of the collective pain state of humanity. It's part of maybe another lifetime that, didn't get resolved. And so like you brought it back in and you chose parents, that would, make you, that you couldn't please. And so that you would activate this belief again. So in this lifetime, you could find the pathwork and realize what it, and clear it.
Exactly. So it's so serendipitous. I know. I get it. It's like, and he does talk about that later on in the lecture, how, okay, so, well, you're here in the place you're in because, you didn't fix it or didn't get around to it the last time, we had to present yet another set of circumstances and opportunities for you to work on what is more important than anything else for you to work on before you can move on to the next, task, so to speak.
Beautiful.
I love it. I love it. I mean, that's like the cosmology of pathwork.
Yeah.
That's where it differs so much from ordinary religion. It's psychological it's spiritual psychology,
Mm-hmm.
with a whole different cosmological narrative.
Right.
That makes way more sense than any other religion.
I agree. Yeah. Exactly. And it's like it is, I think, like part of, when you can recognize again, cosmology is just a story again, and so we have these painful stories, that came out of these, sort of religious, like sort of moralistic religions and stuff like that, that we couldn't really live, or made us just feel guilty or whatever, right? And so to have a life-giving story, right, is really, really valuable. And this is what, it's like on all sides, it keeps affirming, right? So he says you cannot come out of these repetitive cycles, no matter how good your intentions are and how much effort you use in other ways as a substitute for experiencing your feelings, unless you really fully re-experience your earlier feelings. You must cross the barrier behind which you still harbor deep feelings so tucked away that you are not at all aware of them. And for that reason, you can still delude yourself that unhappiness and bad moods just befall you out of nowhere, or that you have bad luck. We mentioned many times that the human predicament is the dualistic split, which is nothing but a delusion of perception. This delusion has many facets. one facet being a split in human consciousness itself. Human beings may feel one thing, believe another, and act without knowing how both these functions govern them. Lack of awareness of what you feel and what you really believe creates another manifestation of the split. When you unify knowing and feeling, you work toward mending and integration, which manifests as a wonderful new awakening and sense of wholeness. When feelings are not experienced in their full intensity, the inner life flow must become stagnant. People will find themselves inexplicably paralyzed. Their actions will become ineffectual. Life will seem to obstruct all their goals and desires. They find closed doors to realizing their talents, their needs, their selves. So-called laziness may be one manifestation of this paralysis. A lack of creativity or a feeling of general despair may be another. In this later instance, people may often use a current event or difficulty to explain away their inner state. The truth is that a sense of futility and confusion about life and your role in it must envelop you when you resist living through the feelings you harbor. You go on harboring them because you delude yourself that avoiding these feelings will hurt you less than exposing them. There are many other manifestations. The inability to feel pleasure or to fully experience life is one of the most widespread general effects. So, one of the images that I sometimes like to use in this way, right, is like you think of a hose, and like the life force is flowing through the hose, and let's say the blocks or the resistance or the defenses are like debris that have accumulated in the, in the hose. And so what we tend to do is, like, when the pressure in the hose is up, we're really aware of all of those blocks, and they pressure us and make us feel uncomfortable, and you know so we just, like, in order to avoid that feeling, we just turn the tap down, right? So then we got a little trickle of life force flowing through, and it's enough to not feel so much pain, but there's no pleasure, there's no life, there's no of the good stuff that we need to have. And so it's like we slowly close down more and more, I think. And yet sometimes, if we can just like allow, even the circumstances sometimes can be, like, life is trying to help us feel. So like I said, I had a little meltdown when, the the flow of life got disrupted, and I thought, like, it was not to my advantage, and it felt all disappointing and grieving. And basically that's what I went through my anger, and I kind of went through very quickly all the stages of grief, and I finally got to the place where I just felt the disappointment. That was the real, you know, basic truth, and when I got to the disappointment was where I could also, surrender and open to acceptance, that if it had to be that way, I would survive it. We would figure out a way, or there would be a way through, and it would be better to just accept that rather than, fight anymore. But I had to go through that process. So it's so helpful just to, like, allow, and I was aware at the time, like, well, I'm probably affecting the larger group, right, with this. I was kind of sitting with it also later, because I wasn't sure, like, maybe it was a little more than was appropriate, or I could have, and I didn't want to, like, kind of drag the group into a negative, stuff. But I heard also in my own study of this, that, okay, so usually in a group, one person is going to be the voice for certain things, right? So, like, there's a way that collectively we can also process through these things, maybe in the group. And so, other people maybe had those feelings, maybe wouldn't have expressed them so directly, but somehow, because that's my channel, they're expressed through me, and maybe even, for the group, right? With and for the group in some way. So it's a study like on all of these things, you know, like, and maybe other people need to take on that role and I don't need to do it for everybody else or something like that. But, you know, I think that there's a lot of real, you know, a lot more understanding that we can get to in terms of this process of, you know, we've got this whole, you know, world right now, and this, all of these polarities and all of these feelings are, you know, being processed and coming up. And, you know, there's a kind of way that I think we, you know, it's like the tension is a powerful transformer, right? You know, hopefully not to pull everything apart, you know, but to bring up all of this so that we can see it and resolve it, and sort of find a way of moving through it. So, anybody have any more comments? Should I continue reading? The total experience of a feeling is as available as your willingness and readiness to venture into it. So this is interesting too, you know, because a lot of times people aren't accessing their feelings and stuff. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, so are you willing, right? You know, notice, because there's the will aspect of things, right? You know, so you have to say yes inside, even if you can't will your feelings to happen, right? You know, you can't make them show up. You have to be willing. And so that's kind of the first step. So to when you want to go in, you know, you have to see and affirm to yourself, okay, I am willing to feel this feeling and receive it. And then these feelings are often accumulations of centuries and millennia, not just decades. Each life incarnation presents the task of cleansing yourself by experiencing and understanding them. You are purified when there is no more waste material. After you terminate this life cycle, the conditions, circumstances, and environment of your next life into which you are drawn is by an inexorable law of life, which you are drawn by an inexorable law of life, will afford you the opportunity to bring to the fore any previously accumulated waste material. But memory of previous incarnations is blotted out so that you have only this life past experience to draw on. The dimming of memory is a byproduct of the life-death cycle in which everyone is caught who denies feeling experience. Isn't that interesting? You know, that's why, you know, the memory dims. When you go on denying awareness and refusing to feel the experience of what you have lived through in this very life, you perpetuate the process of dimming memory. Thus, you perpetuate the cycle of dying and being born. And this process always manifests as a break in the continuity of awareness. Conversely, you eliminate this discontinuity of awareness, and with it, the entire cycle of dying and being born, by living through whatever has accumulated from this life, whatever it is, possible to reestablish the links of memory, wherever it is possible to establish the links of memory. If all the feelings of this lifetime are fully experienced, all residual matter of previous lives will automatically be dealt with, because the trauma of the now is only a trauma because the previous pains had been denied. So that's what we were talking about earlier. Amazing, huh?
Yeah, amazing cosmology. Huge. Totally huge.
You can do this, my friends, if you trust in the process and in the venture of letting go, truly letting go. And here again is the problem. You cannot let go if your innermost being defends against feeling your real feelings, which you now know exist inside of yourself. Actually, you defend against establishing a connecting link between those feelings, your inner knowledge, and your current action patterns. The paralysis that is often deemed laziness, and about which you moralize as if it were that, is therefore to be viewed as a very indirect symptom. And what came to me, you know, besides laziness, also procrastination, you know, other people, you know, many people have that effect too, I think, and it's probably something similar. But really, what really prevents you from fully living is your fear and resistance to living the feelings you did not accept when they first came to you so painfully. Laziness is a protection against the movement of the soul substance, which threatens to bring up the feelings you think you can go on avoiding without blocking your very life. Thus, laziness is simultaneously an effect as well as a defense. Movement stirs up what lies stagnant. That's why we do core classes. By fully understanding this, you can redirect your inner will and inner intent toward overcoming this self-induced protective stagnation by mustering the courage to feel what is there to feel. The true serene state of being, which every soul unconsciously longs for, is not cautious passivity, which must avoid movement and makes movement appear undesirable. The true spiritual state of being is a very active state, although it is calm and relaxed at the same time. It is joyous movement and action. It is only the passivity of the fearful self that creates frenzy as a counteraction against the stagnation. It is as though the personality fought hard against the stagnation by superimposing compulsive action, and then became more alienated from the truth of its stagnation and from the reason for the stagnation, which is the fear of feeling all feelings, including fear. I see this so often, like people are, trapped in this feeling like they have to push themselves to get themselves to accomplish what they need to do in life. And they really have this secret feeling inside that they just want to collapse and not do anything at all, right? And so they afraid of that feeling, and so they just keep pushing. And this feeling is coming from being pushed all the time, right? So there's this vicious circle going on. And so the more that we're trying to use the outer will to move the resistance, the more effort we exert, and kind of exhaustion, and the more tired we feel, and then the more fear we have that we're just gonna not ever get anything done or never do what we want to do. So again, there's just this whole process of a vicious circle so often. And we really do have to begin to trust sort of just our own true inner self. And I think, we have to die the death we've been afraid of dying. So we have to keep ourselves going, so I remember in my own journey, I had some depression as well. And I would get to a place where I would not go into work, and then I would start freaking out. And Susan used to help me. She was my helper, and she would just, tell me, just, okay, so don't go, let yourself collapse. Go ahead and go into, the inactivity, and let the feared death, that, you're never going to want to move again from this place, see if you can die into that. And at first it was very difficult, but more and more, it's like I began to realize, if I let myself, the sooner I let myself die into it, the sooner I recover and find my own inner movement and yes to life again. And then I can get back up and go forward. So, and I see this in a lot of people, like this idealized image that keeps, saying, we have to tell ourselves what to do and how to do it and make it perfect and keep ourselves going, right? So only when this truth is fully felt and understood, when you stop fighting against it and dissolve what causes it by feeling your feelings, can you come out of both the frenzy of overactivity and the paralysis. In other words, you must come to feel the fear that lies in laziness and in all types of stagnation. This fear sits in everyone, even in those of you who are not overtly lazy or who are not aware of the symptoms which this denied fear creates. This basic human condition of fear must be allowed to express itself outwardly. You must allow it to take over in the right setting, of course. And when you experience this fear, you will find two basic elements within it. The first is the childhood conditions, which were so painful that you thought you could not let yourself feel them, so you cut yourself off from them. And the second, even more important and significant element is the fear of experiencing the fear. This is where the real harm lies. A number of years ago, I spoke to you in a lecture on the phenomenon of self-perpetuation, and I illustrated how a denied feeling compounds itself so that it multiplies. For example, denied fear creates fear of fear, and then the fear of feeling the fear of the fear, and so on. The same is true about other feelings. Denied anger creates anger at being angry. Then when this is denied, one becomes even angrier for being unable to accept the anger, and on and on. Frustration itself is bearable when you fully go into it. But when you are frustrated because you ought not to be frustrated, then you are more frustrated because you deny it. The pain extends. This process is so significant because it points clearly to the necessity of feeling directly, no matter how undesirable feelings may be. If you compound your pain because you deny feeling your pain, this secondary pain must become bitter, twisted, and unbearable. If you accept and feel the pain, the dissolving process begins automatically. Many of you have experienced this truth a number of times in your pathwork. The same is true with fear, anger, frustration, or whatever the feeling may be. Then when you feel the fear of your fear and can let yourself drop into the fear itself, this fear will very quickly give way to another denied feeling. That denied feeling, whatever it may be, will become easier to bear than its denial of fear. And the fear itself is more bearable than the fear of the fear. In that way, you can progress to the nucleus of the accumulated waste energy of denied feelings. Fighting your feelings and defending against them creates a whole extra layer of experience that is alienated from your core and therefore artificial and more painful than the original experience it fights against. Your whole conscious self has to gather all its faculties, all its resources, and use all the ground you have gained in order to be fully determined to experience the fear of deep, painful, hurtful, frightening feelings in you. I have often said to you, the only way out is in and through. Few of you, my friends, were able to completely heed these words, but sufficient progress has been made to facilitate the new influx of energy, which will now permit all those who want to go deeper into their selves to do so and come out freed and cleansed and able to truly live. It is important now to focus your meditation. Those of you who have become convinced of the great power you thus generate have learned that the specific focusing and conscious direction you give to your meditation evokes an inner guidance in the right and balanced measure, which you can then apply to your life. The proper direction is twofold. First, you need a commitment to go in and not around yourself. Humankind is, with few exceptions, continually going around rather than through. This voluntary commitment to going in and through your feelings should be the driving force in this specific meditation. So, this is a beautiful, example of doing one of these process meditations that I, been referring to. And so he's giving us some steps here. And so the first thing is, our intention, right? Your declaration and statement that this is what you want and intend to do must create a new condition in your soul substance. You can then request specific guidance, which will immediately loosen up some of the stagnant matter. And so a lot of times what I'm doing in this place, is like, feeling into some block, of stagnant matter. And maybe I'm just calling light, calling presence. And, so I'm being with it, holding it, experiencing it directly just as it is. Maybe I'm still at the level of the layer of the defense, right? But I'm also, like calling presence, of just curiosity, of acceptance, of maybe even compassion to see, oh, there's some, pain place, some old, pain body that is here for compassion and for healing. And so let's say laziness, like there's a stagnant mat or a feeling of laziness that makes you avoid, postpone, and procrastinate. Will disappear sufficiently at this point to set a new energy influx in motion. So part of it is kind of going in and being like, let's say you feel some deadness or something, like it's not trying to go in and find your aliveness. It's going in and being totally with the deadness, right? Be with the laziness. Feel, where does the laziness live in your body? What doesn't want to move? And sometimes it's laziness, sometimes it's agitation, sometimes it's something else, but it's like whatever is there, right? It's like by going with it, that allows us to set a new energy influx in motion. And this voluntary attitude of commitment will create, calls forth the Holy Spirit, is what he's saying here, right? that we're essentially asking Holy Spirit to come in and help us, access and heal and move and release this material. And so this attitude of commitment and request creates an involuntary energy influx and activates the guiding wisdom of your spiritual self. Stating in your meditation your intent and wish to experience all accumulated feelings and rid yourself of waste is the best and most effective beginning. In addition to the right balance and timing, inner and outer guidance will be set up in just the way you need it for your personal situation. You will learn to become attuned to this guidance and sense it rather than miss out and be blind and deaf to it. For it always exists as a waiting potential, not just for this phase of the path, of course, but for every single specific phase that is necessary for you to go through. The outer volitional self must voluntarily play its part so that the involuntary self can then take over. This involuntary self manifests in two entirely different ways: the higher wisdom and guidance just mentioned, and the surfacing of the self that often rise in pain, but denies the experience of the residual pain of long ago. The first helps and guides the latter. So again, we're using the higher self to hold this pain body, this pain state, and be present with it. Through this meditational approach, energy is released that can be directed to this all-important purpose. Often you persuade yourself that you lack the energy and the time to go into the depths of your feelings. At the same time, you spend a lot of energy in other activities, which may seem more important at the moment. No matter how vitally important other activities are, they can never be more important than this exploration. For attending to this life task is your true reason for living. In addition, it is the key to productive living for you right now. The second important aspect of meditation is to summon your faith that going in will not annihilate you. What I say about this now may help you to do so. Without this active faith, you will not have the courage to do it. To put it differently, if the safety and the validity of this course is not clearly conceived at the outset, your disinclination to experience painful feelings will inadvertently lead you to manufacture an artificial doubt. So together with this comes an artificial illusion that going in can be avoided, and still permit you to achieve integration, health, and a full life. Avoidance of feelings always creates such dualistic paradoxes of false doubt and false hope. Many years ago, in a lecture called The Abyss of Illusion, I said that the path of self-realization and unification contains many junctures where it is necessary to let the self fall into what appears to be a bottomless abyss. Falling into it threatens to annihilate the entity. I said that up to a certain point in the individual's evolution, he or she crouches in front of this abyss, holding on and not daring to jump. The individual is very, very miserable in this state, but still believes that the pseudo-safety of this cramped, fearful position is preferred to annihilation. Only after summoning sufficient trust to risk the jump can the person find out that he or she actually floats. Many such junctures are necessary for making the discovery all over again that it is safe to jump. this is really interesting to me because here the guide is exactly precisely just, describing what in shamanic circles is understood as, the shaman's death, right? It's like, and so in many, kind of vision quest, ritual, deep inner process work of the indigenous, right? This very same thing is spoken of, right? And oftentimes if we look at, okay, what, when I'm in duality, I'm in this damned if I do, damned if I don't, or death kind of split. And there's usually one death that I've been dying, trying to avoid what we think of as the worst death, right? And so when we can recognize, oh, I've spent all this time avoiding this death, and this is what I get for it, right? Like I'm still suffering, it doesn't really work, it's like, and we begin to really see the consequences of that choice, consciously, and are not denying again. Then sometimes we can begin to realize, well, maybe it's a good day to try another death, like maybe this death is not worth, repeating anymore. I've been there, done that. Let's try something new. Let's die the death that I've always avoided in this dualism. So then we can maybe turn around and walk to the edge of the other cliff, right? And then we call the higher self, then we call on, the courage, or, the help, and maybe we stick our toe in and we feel like what we're afraid of in making that jump. And again, do this process of feeling the feelings, right? Until we can finally kind of hold our hand and try something that we hadn't tried before. And what we usually will discover when that happens, right, is we don't crash, we float, right? In the shamanic tradition, it's also seen as like, you become an eagle, you sprout wings, you soar, you fly, instead of crashing to the rocks below. So the same applies to letting yourself fall into the apparent abyss of your blocked feelings, painful, frightening feelings. Unless you do so, you will remain in the crouched, uncomfortable position in which it is really quite impossible to live and enjoy yourself. The necessary faith to take the jump can be activated by confronting the issue squarely and examining what it is at stake. You have to give consideration to the fundamental questions, which can be summed up as follows. Is there really a bottomless pit of negativity, destruction, and evil at the foundation of the human condition? Or are these aspects of a distortion that need not exist? If the universe is benign and trustworthy, good and safe, then you cannot and need not fear to let yourself be what you are. There are many junctures where a human being's faith is put to test. You have to face the discrepancy between what you claim to believe and what you actually do believe. If you believe in humanity's ultimate spiritual nature, then you have nothing to fear. If you do not, it is necessary to be aware of this underlying doubt and confront its real nature. Having your doubts in the open will at least protect you from the illusory nature of your faith in humanity and its spiritual destiny. If you then come out with the conviction that you really believe human nature is ultimately bad, destructive, fearsome, and chaotic, the true motive and reason for this belief must also be examined. Such confrontation with what one truly believes versus what one thinks one believes must always be honestly worked through. This is true for any single issue of importance. Help and guidance can and should be activated through meditation for this specific purpose. And so, it's like here's where, like in all of these, meditations, we want to bring into consciousness the fears, the beliefs, right? And then we also need to seek the truth. What is the truth? And if we can call the light, if we can, ask our higher self, oftentimes, a higher clarity comes, or we begin to see the reality, and activate that help and guidance. Just also state in your meditation that you wish to be aware of your specific methods of avoidance and that you no longer want to deceive yourself in this regard. It is better to go on avoiding the jump into the abyss and knowing that you do so and why, than to deny your fear of it and pretend to be unafraid. By freely admitting your fear, you are more in touch with yourself than you were when denying the fear. By confronting the validity of the fear, you may often find that the real reason behind the fear is shame and its partner, pride. Denied pride and shame often create fear. The idea that it is humiliating to have certain feelings or be in certain vulnerable states, along with the idea that you ought not to be where you are, and the feeling that your past suffering as a child is due to your being unacceptable and unlovable, all create the tendency to deny the state you are in. So we feel it's so judged and we're so embarrassed or ashamed or humiliated by it. It's hard. That's probably the hardest thing to, experience directly, right? To breathe into this place of shame. And the pressure of this denial then creates fear, and the fear in turn requires the person to concoct theories to justify the fear. If the people convince themselves that it is indeed dangerous to feel their feelings, this conviction may bring about a breakdown and a crisis. That is merely a result of this deep conviction. It says in Scripture, according to thy belief, it will be done unto thee. This is not a magical process. It is the fear of feeling or feelings. If the fear of feeling or feelings is very strong, it leads to terror, and the terror can bring the person into an acute state of crisis. But the true underlying core feeling is often merely shame and pride, and the misconception that the childhood pain existed because of personal inadequacy, which the individual is too ashamed to expose, right? And so then we can never realize that it's even a myth. It's not even true. We were never inadequate to begin with. We were just little, Crossing the barrier of embarrassment, humiliation, shame, and pride will often dissolve fear. You must confront and squarely face these issues. Only thus can the way be smooth to let yourself go into yourself. Meditation is a requirement without which the way becomes unnecessarily difficult. Such an approach and attitude will build the climate you need to go into the abyss of fright, loneliness, helplessness, pain, and the anger generated by the suffering you had to endure. Every tear not shed is a stoppage. Every protest not voiced sits in you and makes you express it where it is inappropriate. All these feelings seem like bottomless pits, but once you jump into them, you are bound to find that there is a deep inside of you, that divine nucleus which dwells in you and of which you are an expression. It is a light, a warmth, an aliveness, and a security. All these are stark realities, but can be experienced only when you go through the heretofore denied reality of avoided feelings. Your spiritual self, with all its joy, safety, and peace, is right behind the sadness and pain. It cannot be activated by a direct active will, nor by practices and actions that leave out the necessity of experiencing all your feelings. But your spiritual center does manifest inexorably as a byproduct, the result of the direct act of will to go through your denied feelings. I will end this lecture by telling you that the fear is not real. It is truly an illusion, but you must go through it by feeling it. And this is a very famous quote from the guide. It says, through the gateway of feeling your weakness lies your strength. Through the gateway of feeling your pain lies your pleasure and joy. Through the gateway of feeling your fear lies your security and safety. Through the gateway of feeling your loneliness lies your capacity to have fulfillment, love, and companionship. Through the gateway of feeling your hate lies your capacity to love. Through the gateway of feeling your hopelessness lies true and justified hope. Through the gateway of accepting the lacks of your childhood lies your fulfillment now. When you experience all these feelings and states, it is essential that you do not delude yourself into believing they are caused by anything you experience or fail to experience now. Whatever the now brings forth is only the result of the past, which still resides in your system. Through these gateways, you will find true life. All the many temptations that beckon you to follow paths which imply that it is possible to find the spiritual reality of yourself without going through these gateways are wishful thinking. There is no way around what has accumulated in you and has poisoned your whole system, your spiritual, your psychological, and often your physical system. This poison can be eliminated only by feeling what you hoped you could avoid feeling. Then a new energy influx comes in ever greater measure. Many of you have experienced to some degree what I am saying here, and therein lies your growth. But you all have to go further in this regard. The self-punishment for hatred and spite, for cruelty and greed, for selflessness and one-sided demands upon others must be released so you can go into the terror of your fear, your shame, your pain. When you stop fighting this, you will become real, open, and truly alive. Okay, anybody want to have any last comments on very strong, beautiful lecture here on this topic? Let's take a minute maybe in closing and just, like he says, we want to make this commitment, right, inside, like to feel our own willingness. So just go in and see, is that there? Can you, in your higher self, it doesn't mean you have to, all parts of you have to say, oh, yes, I'm ready, but sort of your deep inner self, your highest self, are you willing to say yes to feeling all of these unfelt feelings inside of you? And if you feel that, no, that means also that all of the help and all of, your guidance and support, will walk with you, and, help you clarify and understand and release all that's yet still held. Okay. No specific blessing, but sort of like this whole gateway was a blessing. So
Thank you, Darlene.
yeah.
Yeah, that was really great. Thanks, Darlene.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Mhm.
See you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
But Darlene, am I seeing you tomorrow?
Yeah, did we
Okay.
did you get it? Yeah, 6 o'clock, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Bye-bye.